Welcome to the Expat Pundits. I'm Drew McKenna.
And I'm Kevin Heinz.
Over the weekend, America was enraged by a chance encounter of multiple groups of protesters who clashed at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. The lasting image of this encounter was a group of white, MAGA-hat-wearing young men surrounding a Native American elder in the midst of a tribal chant. Most prominent in this image was one young man with a smug expression staring down the old tribal leader. Almost all media outlets carried this image on their front page, igniting mass anger and disgust over the way white teenagers seemed to be mocking this native person. The image and video seemingly reveal a microcosm of a highly racist society, even being compared to images from the civil rights movement that depict youths dehumanizing African Americans at lunch counter sit-ins and in the streets. However, additional footage from multiple angles has further complicated the simplistic narrative about this encounter. So what should we make of this event? What happened, and what does it reveal about our society? Where do we start this conversation, Kevin?
Well, that's a tricky one. As you mentioned, the thing that I've seen over the past few days since this altercation is pretty much pure outrage, and it's easy to see why. If you look at the image and you look at the videos, devoid of context, except for the context of, American society, which is pretty good context for this sort of thing, you can see that there's a group of white kids, as you mentioned, standing around an old guy, and they look gleeful, they look mocking. And you mentioned that they're Christian, they're wearing MAGA hats, they're all white, so it kind of sets you up for this racist soup, right?
Yeah, I mean, the kids were chanting, if not mocking, the tribal leader. And then there was, of course, the student in the foreground with the smug smile on his face, kind of almost posturing towards the Native American. Now, with reports afterwards, he said he wasn't. He was trying to defuse the situation, but that could possibly be debated.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to be discussing a lot is what is up for debate and what are the facts and what does it matter. So I guess the first thing I want to get to are the facts, and there are so many of them, and we're not going to get to all of them, but just some things that are indisputable about this situation. There were a bunch of kids from this Kentucky Catholic high school. They were mostly white. They were wearing MAGA hats. As well, they were there to protest abortion rights, right? So we all know that's true. They're not disputing this, and that makes them suspect right away, right?
It was the Right to Life March, and they were carrying signs that said defund Planned Parenthood.
Oh, that's right. So it was kind of a counter-protest to this pro-rights protest that was already there. So right away, you can kind of tell there's some shittiness to these people, regardless of what happened in the video. I would also say there were multiple groups, distinct groups that we know about, two of which have been discussed in the first couple of days, and that was the Native American group and the MAGA white kids. But there was another group which we'll discuss in a bit, and I think it does bear some importance to how this whole thing played out.
Sure does.
And the fact that there was no violence is a fact. There was no punching or stone throwing or shooting, which is a positive for American altercations. And there were definitely some things shouted, some definitely negative and otherwise. And I think that is a lot of what's in dispute here today. And I guess maybe I would just ask Drew, what is your take on this? How did you feel when you saw this, and how did you respond?
Well, first, I was pretty outraged and not pleased after the initial video that showed that kind of smug, cocky teenager, again, posturing towards this, this tribal elder who was just doing his traditional chant there. But then later on, as we'll talk about, other videos have surfaced, or additional video footage of what happened, which does kind of cloud up the story a little bit, as it should, or it brings in all these new angles. And one thing, and it just made me think, like you said, there were multiple groups here at the Lincoln Memorial. They all converged somehow for some reason. And it just makes me think, when you go to Washington, D.C., the Lincoln Memorial, the reflecting pool, that's where lots of people do go to protest and make their voices heard. So it's really, I guess, no big surprise that this happened. I mean, you bring these, groups from anywhere together. Said you had these kids from the Kentucky Catholic High School. You had the Native Americans there, and of course the women's marches were going on. I don't know if they happened the same day as well, but that's all happening. So
you reminded me of that. I'd forgotten. I think they were
Yeah.
the same. I think
Yeah.
they might have been the same day.
yeah, it's like when you go to the big city, like I said, the diversity all comes together. People from all these different backgrounds coming together, and anything could happen.
So it wasn't like you couldn't really compare this to a Charlottesville where this was this orchestrated, almost like you can tell what's going to happen before, this orchestrated clash between these racist alt-righters and people against those kind of people, and happening in a college town in Virginia. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, none of this was planned at all. I think the kids from the Kentucky high school were just actually waiting to get on the bus to head home when this was happening. Yeah.
Right. And that was one of the defenses, I guess, or at least one of the points that was pointed out, is that they were all kids.
Yep.
And, well, I mean, even the word kids carries some connotative weight here, because
Sure.
if they're all white, so if we paint them as kids, it seems a bit that we're dismissing their knowledge about what they were doing. But I think it is important to ask first, what were they doing and what happened? So, okay, I want to say my first impression after watching this video was the same way. And I didn't personally post the video, but I did comment on several in my snarky way about how these shitheads are, I don't remember exactly what I had said, but basically how I'd want to punch this kid in the face. And I think that his punchable face made it that much more easy for everybody on the left, I guess, to get behind it and say, like, this is the microcosm. This is basically emblematic of what's happening in our society. This white supremacy, you got these white guys against this one native guy, and he's a Vietnam vet, and hey, Trump, what do you think about this? The intersection of patriotism and white privilege at the same time. So it's like, which one do you choose? The patriot who's brown and not European, of European descent, or do you choose the kids who are super MAGA and yet shouting against the
Super MAGA,
brown guy? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could say the kids are innocent, and certainly in most situations like this, they could have been, but for reasons we've talked about and we'll continue talking about, they're not innocent. And the big thing was, these kids were wearing MAGA hats.
And protesting abortion rights.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's an issue in itself. I mean, just think about this. You have students from an all-male Catholic school in Kentucky, and they're going to Washington, D.C. to protest, or maybe not, you don't have to say protest, they're there to support the pro-life movement. Or to say, you can say they're going to protest abortion. Yeah. And they had signs that said defund Planned Parenthood. Now, of course, from many of my female friends and fellow activists, they really don't like this at all. That's an understatement. Because basically, it's showing how men, mostly white men, want to control the female body. And that's pretty hard to dispute. Yeah, you could say, like all pro-life people say, the unborn fetus is innocent. And yeah, that's their argument, but ultimately it comes down to control over female bodies. And if you haven't, it just isn't right, I feel, to have an all male group, or to have men get too involved in this movement.
The optics are very bad, and it's almost like a cliche, right? You have this Christian group of white people from a place that's very white and a little bit backwards, sorry, Kentucky, yelling at Native American peoples. I mean, that's what it looks like. But I want to get into the details, because I think I totally agree with Drew in that regardless of where we parse the facts, the fact that these guys are there to protest abortion automatically makes them a bit, But
Exactly.
but I want to just go into some details, because I do think my argument, and I think Drew and I talked about this before, I think Drew lands a little bit left of me, and I land a little bit, I don't know, I don't know, maybe not right, but
Wait, left of you just in general?
nah.
over this incident?
On this issue, because that's why
Okay,
this
sure.
issue is really fascinating to me, because maybe it's because there are more than these two groups. There's a third group which I want to get into, but not too much. But it's just like a microcosm of our outrage culture and how we deal with these kinds of situations. Like, how much do we judge? What sort of consequences are there for the people involved? And eventually, what do we do about it? Rather than, just only shaming the people, and should we even jump to those conclusions? And maybe the details aren't that important. We could almost skip the details, right?
Sure.
So
well, let's talk about, you mentioned the
Okay.
third group here. And let's just preface this. Many of the people who think these students were innocent and they're not guilty of anything, they are arguing that these students were actually provoked. And one mother of one of the students, if it's okay if I bring this up now, she said they were all enraged because of some black Muslims who were there, who
Always
enabled
the black
them
Muslims.
and provoked them. Yeah, but
Jeez.
then the very ironic thing was, when you watch and listen to the video, it was actually a group called the Black Israelites.
yeah, black
Who
Hebrew
encountered
Israelites.
These high school kids. Yeah, the Black Hebrew
Yeah, and
Israelites.
I want to talk about this just from a fact perspective, because I think if we don't admit what happened in a situation and we just jump to the conclusion and saying, oh, it doesn't matter, you're just splitting hairs because of your white privilege, you can really apply that thesis and that position to anything that happens. And I think at least first you need to look at what the facts were and not look at this as if it occurred. It's not in a vacuum, but it occurred with several actors and several agents from different walks of life involved. And so I just want to talk about the guy in the middle of it, who was Nathan Phillips, the Omaha tribe elder, who was the man beating the drum. And he had claimed afterwards that he had entered this situation basically to diffuse this potentially explosive fight that might have been happening between these black Hebrew Israelites and these MAGA-hat-wearing dudes. And what happened was, according to many witnesses, these 4 grown men were yelling slurs and insults at this group. Not good, but and what these young men had said, especially Nick Sandman, who is the douchey-faced guy standing in the front, he actually hit back and said, I wasn't trying to cause any sort of consternation or racism or go against this guy. I was just...
Yeah, he said he was trying to diffuse the situation.
And I don't know, like, I have to say, okay, your face
That's
is
what he
douchey,
said.
but... So I'm just trying to put the whole thing together. Like, it happens it doesn't happen in a vacuum, it happens in a context. There were several people instigating and chastising this group, especially an African-American member, these guys yelling at them, these black Israelites yelling about how you shouldn't be with these white guys. But it wasn't just a persuasive argument. It was kind of like, they're going to fuck your sister sort of thing, and like they're going to tear you apart and do horrible things to you. And these kids are teenagers, mind you. And so I guess what happened, according to many of the kids, is they started chanting their spirit songs, which is like, Covington, #1, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, some lame Catholic school bullshit. And
it was a little bit hard to decipher as well, what they're exactly saying.
So in the video that captures that, right, they're chanting. Mm-hmm. They're around this Native American guy who is chanting. The kids are chanting. And some of the kids start kind of chanting with the drum and maybe sort of hiya, hiya, hiya chanting too. So you have this like, the cringeworthy, ugly 10, 20-second video where it's like, you can easily look at it and extrapolate from that all these kids are just mocking this elderly man. And I think that is what the image on most media sites, and that's what people really got from it. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to go into any more facts, actually. That's it about the event. There might be more facts, but I
want to bring something up, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I want to know if you remember what the black Israelites were saying to the high school kids from the Catholic school. It sounded like maybe they think these kids were being anti-Semitic a little bit. They were kind of like warriors for white supremacy, white Christian supremacy.
Yeah, and they wouldn't be wrong.
Okay. Yeah,
but
partly, yeah.
What's interesting
and then I remember, like I said, Nathan Phillips came in supposedly trying to defuse the situation, pounding his drum and commencing the chant. And then the kids appeared to be, notice I say appeared to be mocking him. And then, of course, the Black Israelite group were saying, oh, what are you doing to this old man? Why are you picking on this old man? What did he do to you?
Wait, the black guys were saying that?
Yeah.
I don't.
After Nathan Phillips came in, I'm pretty sure they were.
Well, according to what site do I have here?
They were taunting back and forth, and then they seemed to be directing their taunts and chants, their mockery towards Nathan Phillips as he was beating his drum. And then they did comment on that a little bit.
I hadn't heard any comments from the Black Israelite guys. I'd only heard Nathan Phillips and this Nick Sandman guy. I didn't know they reached out to the other group for commentary. You heard from that group?
Well, I don't know if they reached out for commentary, but they did say, basically, look what you're doing to this, old Native American now. You said, and they were kind of talking to him indirectly, saying, oh, look what they're doing to you. This is what they do. So just, maybe they were provoked a little bit. It just shows
there is
the larger context.
Because there was, from this smaller group, I got this from Pathos, I guess. I'll have to check out this video. They said the 4 men, there was only 4. This wasn't a group, and this isn't necessarily indicative of the whole group, but they were yelling at the Native Americans, saying, God took away your land. God took away your land for worshiping animals, and that the Indians were savages. They were also...
The Black Israelites said that?
Yeah. They were also...
that adds a whole other dimension. Wow.
I mean, if you look in the Southern Poverty...
It does get a little crazier.
The Southern Poverty Law Center classifies them as a hate group. So, I mean...
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and I have seen several other videos where these guys are kind of instigators, and it has nothing to do with race. It's just these extreme dudes are sort of like the make-believe Semitic answer to the Nation of Islam, whereas the Nation of Islam is an established group. The Black Hebrew Israelites are guys who stand on the streets and basically yell profanity and call everybody, like, they're kind of like the God Hates Fags group, Westboro Baptist Church.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, they have that level of vitriol.
Yeah.
So it's almost like if you took away that element, would this event have happened? And yet, in the main reporting, you actually don't hear about these guys yelling. It's almost like they don't exist, or there's no importance to what they are contributing to this occurrence. And that's interesting too.
That is a very crucial element and piece to this whole scenario. What the Black Israelites were doing and saying. And people who say the Covington High School kids were provoked, yeah, they have a legitimate argument. But are they innocent? I am going to give a hard no to that.
Yeah, wait.
One of the other facts that we talked about, and I'm going to bring this up
again. You're jumping ahead. I mean, I totally agree with you.
Okay. I know you agree with me. I'm just saying. Yeah.
But I wonder if
the kids were provoked, but there's another layer to this, another context we need to talk about.
But at the same time, what Drew's saying is almost like that's exactly what the conversation's gone to. It has gone to, let's get extremely enraged. I mean, I'm not saying that you're doing this at all, but I mean, this is actually the trajectory of the conversation where everybody has been made up their mind about what happened, looking at this photo, looking at these images, and we all, many of us were guilty. We're like, oh, that's really bad. Like, screw these kids. Then we found out more. We're like, well,
I was the same way.
It's pretty, maybe that's not what happened, but then we jumped to like, but they're still guilty because of this. And yeah, I agree. I don't.
Well, yeah, maybe let me say what they're guilty of.
Okay, go ahead. We should go on that first, and then
Sure. Kevin, what were the kids wearing? What was that kid with a smug Joker-like smile? What was he wearing?
It looked like Ralph Lauren.
Ralph Lauren. He probably was. Probably
did they
top
make
of the line.
MAGA hats?
A lot more than I had when I was a kid. Yeah, he was wearing a MAGA hat.
Yeah.
I don't like saying MAGA hat.
MAGA.
He was wearing the red
MAGA.
Yeah, I'll say MAGA. That sounds better. MAGA. The red MAGA hat. Yeah.
Maggot.
Okay. That red MAGA hat. That is not a symbol of peace.
I would agree.
That is a symbol that provokes a lot of emotions in people, a lot of negative emotions in a lot of groups, and deservedly so. So if you're going to go to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, and that's where you go to protest, to make your voice heard in front of all the government institutions. But like I said, it's a big city. There's a lot of different groups of people there, multicultural. And that MAGA hat is a symbol against multiculturalism, okay? And you can go as far to say it's a symbol of hate. And so I cannot feel sorry for these kids and what happened to them if they're wearing that hat.
Would you go so far as to say if you walk into a cafe and someone like swears at you, or step it up, throws an egg at you, or step it up, punches you? I mean,
because you're wearing the hat?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that before, and like,
oh, that's that's uncalled for. No, there's no need for violence.
What about just take the fucking hat off, maggot, or just
okay. Well,
so at what level does that? Do you think that symbol of the hat is so inherently just
I'm not. Just because
that
someone wears a hat doesn't mean you should provoke violence or even violent language. But what it stands for is, and I'll come out and say it. It stands for white supremacy, which is what Trump stands for.
Yeah.
And so when you take a white supremacy stance, you are marginalizing African Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, everyone. And some people would even say the MAGA hat is Trump's hat, and could be a misogynist hat as well. And those are all the negative, condescending, hateful things that hat represents.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement, at least on the left, and I wonder if there is confusion. I've heard many takes on this, and are Trump supporters inherently racist? And if you wear a MAGA hat, pretty much all you're saying is you're a Trump supporter, right? So if you support Trump a lot, and that means you might wear a hat, therefore you're wearing a symbol of hatred. And I mean,
I would say that you're not flat out racist if you're a Trump supporter, but you condone the racism, which is pretty much just as bad.
Do you think that the response to that should be what these kids got? And at least I say these kids, I mean, yeah, the high school, the backlash, a lot of these kids are going to get expelled, or at least suspended.
Well, we'll see what happens here.
And I think that's important because we were having this argument or this conversation before, which is, do the actual facts of this case matter in the general scheme of things? I mean, you could say, well, there's this, and these kids didn't actually do this, but there's many, 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 many countless other instances where white people are exercising their privilege and racism, I mean, even systemically towards minority people. And this was just like, it's just encapsulated in this whole event. So it doesn't matter on that level whether they did this or not. It's almost like, well, kind of let your mind decide, right? But when it comes to the actual consequences legally, or if these kids are expelled from school, then I think it does matter. And I think on the left, like, that's what distinguishes us from right-wingers, is that we have like some modicum of discernment between the details of the situation. And I totally agree that if you're wearing a hat, you deserve to be called out, I guess. But
exactly.
What is that? What does that entail? I mean,
like I said, you're not a racist if you wear a MAGA hat, but you're condoning it. And also to further that point, we're in the United States, we're probably just getting over the Martin Luther King holiday. And Martin Luther King, to paraphrase, he always said, the biggest problem isn't the White Citizens Council or the Ku Klux Klan, it's the white moderate who goes along with it.
That's
right. I
mean,
there's all kinds of quotes from civil rights leaders, activists. Elie Wiesel, the Holocaust survivor who wrote Night, among other things, always said, the worst people are those who stay silent, who take neither side. And he always says, you should always take sides. Neutrality's not an option. If you're wearing a MAGA hat, you're not neutral, but you are taking, a side of white supremacy, and you're condoning hatred towards other groups, whether you agree with it or would do it yourself.
Let's talk about the background then too, if we're gonna get into evidence.
Sure.
I think because it has something to say about our culture, the fact that there's this instant reaction. But what you saw happen, why the reason we're doing this podcast is, it's not like that was the final word. This image that was on every newspaper, there was suddenly leaked other video footage, and people started to talk about it. And I just hope that people continue this conversation. But Drew, can you tell me about what was recently, you showed me on social media, what was recently uncovered about a couple things, I guess, uncovered about the people that attend Covington High School.
Okay, yeah. I mean, well, let's look at Covington High School. Again, the whole place just, I mean, I haven't been there, but...
You haven't been to Covington High School?
No, I'm saying I kind of reluctantly want to pass judgment like this.
What do they call it? Covcath? Covcath.
Yeah. I mean, so it's looks like a pretty elite Catholic school where you got...
it's in Lexington.
Yeah. Is
it Lexington?
I'm not sure. Well, it's in... It's actually
Cincinnati.
The name of the school is Covington. I think it's in northern Kentucky. It's not in Lexington.
It's like
or
Cincinnati-ish.
Yeah, probably
Louisville,
closer to Cincinnati.
Okay.
Yeah. But like I said, it looks like a pretty. Actually, I looked at their website a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And the apology pops up every time you go to the site. From the diocese there, which they should. That's
Make
a
sure
good
to
thing.
post that on our notes.
Yeah, but no, I mean it's pretty much your prototypical elite Catholic school. All boys. Looks like it has some pretty strong athletic programs. And like I said, but like from the one student who was standing next to Nathan Phillips, had that smug look on his face that I'll never get out of my mind. That whole culture, this white male jocular culture, just reeks of arrogance and smugness. Like I said, they were there for the pro-life movement to regulate the female body. You can spin that if you want to, especially conservatives, but that's what it is. You want to have dominance over the female body and take away her choice, and so she doesn't have the freedom that you do. That's one thing, and so there was another photo which came out, and people were maybe disputing the factualness of it.
It looked pretty extreme. If I can, let me describe it real quick.
Sure. Okay.
Blackface, just like lots of blackface in a basketball game. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, it was a photo from a basketball game.
Shirtless blackface, black body.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was from 2012, a little while ago, but still, it was.
That's fresh.
Yep, it was a Covington High School basketball game, and it showed an inbounds player. There was a black player from the opposing team taking the ball out of bounds, and the crowd was right behind him, and about 3 people down. Yeah, there was a shirtless high school student, had black face and the black body, like the old minstrel shows from the 19th century. Yeah, actually, they said that that's what the students do. They have like a blackout.
Oh, that's what they
wear
do.
Black T-shirts, but
that's really illuminating, there, right?
No, yeah, that was pretty funny.
If that's what they do,
that was pretty funny.
And then we could get another conversation. Are the kids responsible for this because these are the waters they swim in? America's racist. I mean, that's all true. Mm-hmm. And then it's really, I mean, to me, that's where it comes back to is like, we need to have a conversation. That sounds maybe vague and lame, but I mean...
We need a lot of conversations. Yeah.
I don't know that the response, the outrage, and the doxing. They doxed this kid, They sent everybody his name and where he lives and his phone number. He's getting death threats. Great. That's awesome. Like, what does that accomplish exactly? I mean, so... I just don't know that accomplishes what we're trying to... what our end game is. We're going to scare out all the racism. No, I mean... And that's what we're going to bring up in a further podcast that Drew has been talking about is what makes America so what it is, so Trumpian. Why is Trump, why does he exist? And I just think that the fact that racism exists to this level is not just because we have shamed it away. It's because we haven't figured out how to get policies and, to build social bridges to make all of us seem equal, and there could be economic and social reasons for that, but I don't know that pure shaming is a method that works.
Sure.
Yet that seems to be the go-to method is just like throwing rocks at this guy, and it's kind of, I don't know, unsettling a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like when I first saw the video, I said I didn't have all the details, and it looked like the Covington kids were definitely mocking, making fun of, maybe even intimidating, posturing towards Nathan Phillips. But as, of course, more information came out, there was, all the provocation from the Black Israelites group. And then I guess, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but Nathan Phillips kind of saw this conflict, this verbal conflict going on. So he decided to step in the middle.
Yeah, he walked into it.
Yeah, he walked right into it.
Good for him.
Yeah. But then I noticed if he walked into it, he did kind of step up pretty close to Nathan Sandman there, the guy with the Joker smile.
It's totally true.
And the smug smile. Yeah, so I'm wondering, why did he go so close to him?
Well, I saw someone post too, and instant backlash from this guy, but it was like, oh, this Nathan Phillips guy is a provocateur. He does this. And my first feeling was, oh, he's just victim blaming or making some excuse. And so were the other people. It's like, screw you. You're just a maggot defender. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, if the fact is that he walked into this group of people and he's known for being a provocateur, and afterwards he's saying things. There's another issue that really pissed me off a little bit because I'm not sure of the truth, and that makes me angry. But he said that people were shouting, build the wall. I've seen the videos. I never heard anybody chanting that. And if it exists, like, I would really love to see it, and I would agree. But it's almost the same with any kind of riots, like in Ferguson, when you have reporters saying, oh, there's people that are exacting extreme devastation on the town and burning things and throwing things at cops. It's like, but those were outside provocateurs. Those weren't the townspeople, but they all get painted as that.
Sure.
And like, that's not right. I mean, that's just factually wrong.
Right.
And it just makes everybody look like a piece of shit. If the rest of the kids, if 99 of the kids were shouting their spirit song in response to this other retaliation, and then they got distracted by this weird old Indian guy walking in the middle with a drum, and they started shouting, heya, heya, I didn't hear build the wall. It's like this really complex mix, too. The fact that they are 17 years old, it's just like...
Okay, yeah, I'll chime in.
It's not black and white. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't actually hear the build the wall slogan either. I know there was another Native American with Nathan there, and he said he claimed to hear someone did actually shout, build the wall. But, so, I mean, who knows? I mean, there are just so many complexities. Like I said before, I thought, yeah, the kid should get expelled, but now I'm a little bit on the fence. I mean, I don't like what they did at all. I mean, yeah, maybe they didn't shout build the wall, and it sounds like actually they didn't. But then again, they had the MAGA hats on, so that's kind of the symbol for build the wall, even though they actually didn't say it. And again, with the chanting that they were doing, I mean, you think about it, Kevin. When you're in elementary school, I'm a teacher, and I've actually seen several moments like this. When maybe you're on a field trip or you're watching a video with elementary age students, and you hear the Native American, they start to do their chants like, hi, ya, 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 ho, and to an elementary kid, that's actually kind of funny. They all start laughing.
Yeah, to an elementary kid.
So, yeah, but eventually, you outgrow that immaturity, and you realize, yeah, it sounds a little weird, but this is actually their language, and we need to be respectful of all cultures. And so when they do those chants, no matter how it sounds, we need to respect them.
Sure.
And so now everyone says, this is actually one of the larger debates we could have in America, which I don't think it's as much of an issue in other countries from what I've seen. But the old excuse is, hey, they're just kids. And yeah, they're high school kids, but
yeah,
you can learn, I mean, you can learn right from wrong at a pretty early age. You know better.
I think that's totally true.
Yeah, I mean, how old? I mean, how old do you have to be to kind of turn that corner?
But that begs the question too.
Where you don't, laugh at Native Americans because they chant a different language than you.
That's fine, and I don't think anybody in America is going to argue with you because, as we're going to talk about, this.
I think they would argue with me. I mean, I think a lot of people would say, "Oh, they're just kids," but I would say.
That's
we've
not
called
a common...
We've called these kids, young men. I mean, what are they? Nathan Sandman was, he's a junior in high school.
That's true. There is a...
Yeah, I mean...
There is a bit excusing on behalf of youth.
I mean, when you're of high
white.
school age, if you're a young man, you know how to conduct yourself.
Right, but let's move past that.
Okay, but obviously these kids
I think
didn't know.
That is a simplistic argument because, let's say...
Okay, yeah, true.
If they're 17 and we can take... For granted, yeah, you get it. All right, so then what? I mean, so then let's talk about the institutions rather than shaming this guy, doxing him, calling him out, saying these kids are shitheads. I mean, you can shame the school, and maybe if you think that has the consequences you want to reach, that if you shut down their school or kick out all their kids, that's going to change their culture. But I just think that there might be other means of teaching them that goes beyond demonization. And I think like focusing on the individual is the very American thing. Like saying you should know better. You're old enough. You should know better. But if you swam in this racist waters, which we agree that America has, it's just inherently racist. And then so I mean, well, you expand that idea, but you should know better. But then you have hundreds of Braves and Indians and Redskins fans chanting hua 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 and Indian things at games. It's completely accepted in our culture to emulate, to co-opt Indian culture, and I think in the moment, I don't know. So it's right. Well, it's very difficult to bring the hammer down.
But the Braves fans aren't doing it towards one individual.
The Braves
they're not
fans
making fun of one person.
And that is a question. Were they making fun of this guy?
It's almost apples and oranges, I would say. But yeah, there is the larger.
The Braves
context.
fans are an entire stadium full of white people with no Indians pretending to be Indian because it's fun. In this context, there was an actual Native American guy with a drum shouting, and they were participating. I think it's much more acceptable in that situation to participate, especially as a 17-year-old, if you're doing. But it's intent too, right? I mean, it's intent. If you think I'm part of this situation, I don't know what's going on, but I'm like the spirit's moving me, and I'm shouting with this Indian guy who's real life banging a drum in front of me. How can you demonize that? I mean, it's just like, I think the reason that we do is because of the old photos that we've seen of we're comparing it to the old sit-ins, and there's definitely a parallel. Like they definitely, and to move on to what we were saying.
Yeah, I don't know if
even if they were wrong or right, the issue exists. Right. The issue is a issue. The racism is a racism, whether it happened on that day, at that time. It's a real fucking thing.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I'm not demonizing the kids.
You're not.
Yeah, I might have posted a couple things how I don't approve of what they did.
You said you wanted to shit in the kids' cornflakes, Drew. No, he didn't say that.
There we go. Fake news. Fake news.
You heard it here in Expat.
Yeah,
Pundits first.
I mean, so what should happen to them? I still don't know. I don't want to say whether they should be expelled or not. But definitely, I mean, this is a learning experience for them, and kind of a tough one. Because there are a lot of people demonizing them, and to be a kid, they have to go through this. They didn't really ask for it. Again, this was kind of just a chance encounter a little bit. It said you had all the different groups coming together, but it happened.
What if you were that kid in the middle with that smug face? I mean, they have such a thing as resting bitch face, right? Well, with this guy, what if he just looks like he's got a punchable face? I
tell you, I don't know, because if I was him, I'm not really a confrontational person when it comes down to it. If he really wanted to de-escalate the situation, he should have just walked away. But he just stood there. I mean, actually, we didn't talk about this yet. We didn't, after the aftermath. Well, after all the initial criticism of Nathan Sandman there. And the demonization
Nick
of
Sandman,
him.
right, the kid. Yeah.
Oh, is it? I said okay, Nick
Nathan
Sandman.
Phillips,
excuse me. After he was demonized by a lot of the country, he did come out with a statement, but of course it was from a PR firm who helped him make that statement. We haven't really talked about that. So, according to the PR firm, their statement said that he was trying to de-escalate the situation.
Good job, PR.
And I would say, again, that's some white privilege right there.
You got a whole PR firm backing up your statement.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if I would.
On behalf of this one kid.
I know a lot of people have done some stupid things, and they didn't have a PR firm to get their back.
No, it's such a good point. That's why this is such a fascinating issue. Event.
I think if he genuinely wanted to defuse the situation, he would have walked away. But he didn't walk away. He had that smug look. Well, and I would argue he was posturing.
Do you think if the old man wanted to defuse the situation, he would have walked into a group of MAGA-hat-wearing guys? Do you think
that's true?
He could have walked back?
You could put the blame 50-50.
Was he using his old man privilege because the young guy should have respected this elder native? I mean, it depends on the culture you live in, and the reality is we live in a culture where young people don't respect elders, period. If it was an old white guy walking through with a cane, he might have done the same thing. And there's actually no way to know that. If it was an old white guy acting like dancing a jig, like, I'm doing the jig, and he walked up and like the young kid's not necessarily going to act deferential and like bow out, excuse me, sir.
Right,
I mean, he might just stare at him and nonplus, like, what's this guy doing? Mm-hmm. And you got a lot of this testosterone-laden little shits, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'll put half the blame on Nick Sammon and half the blame on Nathan Phillips. They didn't exactly walk away from each other.
They should get together over a beer.
And actually, this is another point that I recall now.
That's how you defuse the situation.
I'm going to bring race into this issue again.
This is the first time.
You know, talking about personal conduct and how you go about yourself. I know from what I've actually talked to, just friends of mine and people I know, especially African Americans, especially, they know ahead of time from an early age that they have to watch themselves, almost like they're walking on eggshells, walking on ice all the time, because any African American child learns from an early age that if they're in any type of situation and they react with maybe shouting, raising their voice, maybe posturing or acting out in any way, that they're going to be condemned for it. They're going to be blamed for starting a conflict or maybe even violence, even if they're guilty or not, just because of the history of racism in our country. But if white kids come into a situation and they start shouting or escalating a situation, they're going to be off the hook. It's just how it is. And so I just think, what if it was a group of black teenagers who were mocking, Nathan Phillips? Oh, the dogs would come out, metaphorically. Everyone, this whole country, to let the dogs out on them, and they wouldn't get the benefit of a doubt, like Nick Sammon and his Covington classmates are getting.
In the moment, too, right? I mean, it wouldn't
exactly.
be. You wouldn't have to have like a protracted national backlash against you. You would just be afraid that the cops might come out and you end up in jail. Yeah, and that's it. Like that's going to inhibit that behavior.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I know, like, just from hearing, accounts from my friends and, other people I know or people I've heard from, said if you're a black man or a black teenager, you gotta watch yourself. But if you're a white kid, you don't have to watch yourself.
Then again, the only people verified in video footage of like yelling racial slurs are the 4 black guys. So, I mean, you always have exceptions, and the exception proves the rule, right? Tests the rule.
Exactly.
But yeah, like the fact that there are all these young kids, they're not worried about that. That's your point. Whereas the black Hebrew Israelites, it's almost like they are responding to that with a sort of curtness and like awareness that they're being anti. I don't want to say antisocial, but that they're being controversial. Whereas the white kids, like, what are we doing? Like, they have no idea. They don't need to care. Right. It's a big. It's a difference. Exactly. Yeah. And you learn that young, or you don't learn it if you're white. You just learn what you can do. Right. Whatever you want. And then the anger in that is anger when you get accused of hurting someone else, whereas the anger of other groups is that you get shit on by the white groups that are not really, but there's no consequence for them.
Yeah, and exactly. We'll throw another wrinkle into this. After this all went down, one of the mothers of the Covington students said, well, the kids were provoked by a black Muslim. That's a fact, right? That's been documented.
So we've been talking about Israelites for a while.
Yeah.
Israelites.
But yeah, she said, well, actually,
not Muslims.
Yeah, the white Covington parents said, our kids were fine. They were enabled and provoked by black Muslims.
Is that a Freudian slip then?
Yeah, I know, it's so ironic.
Black militant, they're Muslims.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's
Farrakhan was there somewhere.
There's American racism right there.
Right. It's just in the skin, right?
You can't just say they were provoked by somebody. They're provoked by black Muslims. So that means that black people are bad, Muslims are bad, and also of course black Muslims are bad.
It's almost like
that's why again I don't want to let these. Yeah.
But yet it's almost like you don't want to point a gun at her and say like, you racist bitch, but you want to say like, that's just, you point at that and say that's the
If you
first
did, you'd
thing
be
that
right to
people
do so.
say. That is part of our culture. We need to talk about that, right? Just simply shaming that person, which is what I see. And I just think that response on the left there's got to be some more nuanced, more intellectually, thought out response to that. And I think that we're going to be up to the task.
Hold on. You think there needs to be a more nuanced, thought-out response to the woman who shouted they're enabled by the black Muslims?
I think that
we need to give her. We need to condone that.
If she's a person and every other single racist is a person, then how do you differentiate it? Like, you just shove them into an oven and say, "Be gone with you, go to the sun"? No, I mean, there has to be a conversation on how to. I mean, those people exist, and that's what Trump showed. Like, they didn't just mushroom out. Like, they were people that existed with fully formed in their racism. Obama didn't eradicate them with his presence as president. They existed. Trump didn't make them exist. Right. If you want to get rid of those people, I mean, like, shame is maybe an effective weapon, but then I think education. And there's models that we can look at. And I'm not sure. I'm no expert on this whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's a whole.
Shame's easy on social media,
It is. But if you want to talk about education, starting to alleviate this problem, yes, it could. But that's a whole nother story.
Can I read this? I think we're gonna
have to talk about that another day.
I think we're gonna have to be played out here, but I want to read this quickly. I think this encapsulates what we're saying, because this issue is complicated, but it shows that these are real issues that are in this microcosm of a whodunit. It doesn't matter who done it. There isn't a single killer. There's a lot of interplay that shows us who we are as a society. So I want to read this. This is a quote by Ruth Graham in Slate News. She wrote that the facts here in this encounter in Washington are important and worth clarifying, and they don't change the larger story, the one that caused so many people to react so viscerally to this narrative first, and the simpler draft that we've heard. We shouldn't make the same mistake the president does when he confuses climate and weather. The weather is the encounter between Salmon and Phillips, and it's the media's responsibility to describe it accurately. The climate includes a president whose name is used as a taunt by school bullies and racist harassers, who wields the rhetoric of domestic violence to cause pain and then blame those who are suffering, who delights in teasing and threatening his enemies, and who just last week made a joke about a government massacre of Native Americans. It would be a mistake to let our pre-existing views persuade us to see something in this particular video that isn't there. But it would also be misguided to let the complexities of the scene at Lincoln Memorial dissuade us from telling the truth about who Trump is and exactly what he stands for, and, end quote, and what these people stand for and what our society too often stands for.
Yeah, that's where we're at right now. So, yeah, you can't blame any one party or one group, but you need to look at all the groups and the social context of what happened here.
When you look in the mirror, folks.
Or any other conflicts. Exactly.
Look in the mirror.
Yep. So, yeah, Nathan Phillips needs to look in the mirror. The black Israelites need to look in the mirror. And
all sides. You're not saying all sides here, right?
I hope Nick Salmon and the people at Covington Catholic look in the mirror, too, because they are not innocent at all in what happened.
No.
And they're as big a problem of the whiter culture as anyone.
The whiter culture. We should.
I said the whiter culture. Whiter. WIDER.
Drew
the
hates
whiter culture.
www.drewhateswhitpeople.com. He wants a whiter culture.
There we go.
For less white people.
Yeah.
All right. So hey, good second episode.
Definitely.
This has been Podcast Pundits.
Yep.
Expat Pundits.
The Expat Pundits.
Jesus, we did this last time.
Yeah. But I'll just say, I mean, it's good we're actually talking about this. Everyone does the knee-jerk reaction on social media, on Facebook, but this is real talk here. We're looking at the issues. We've looked at some sources, and like I said, these are words coming out of our mouth.
You're only gonna find real talk here.
And exactly. So
no bullshit.
It's it's been a pleasure, Kevin.
All right, you too, Drew.
Yep. Have a good night.
Expat Pundits.